right, so good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in from truly around the world today. We've got folks joining us from 3 continents, which is very exciting. My name is Jesse. I'm with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and I know we've got quite a few familiar faces in the crowd today, but we've got a lot of newbies as well, including our speaker. And so if you are new to us, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, today is exciting for a number of reasons. Number one, it's our first collaboration with the amazing folks at Ocean School. Ocean School is one of the greatest resource hubs with some of the prettiest stuff I've ever seen in my entire career of science communication. So if you want to learn about the sea, whether it's coral or Arctic or anything that you're keen on, check out this website. I will link this into all our registered classes at the end. There's so much to explore and discover. And it's also exciting because we are continuing our epic month of February solely with the most amazing women in science and exploration on planet Earth. We kick out all the dudes every February. We've done this since our inception. We have like 55, 60 broadcasts with the coolest women on Earth. Seriously, earlier today, we were live with glaciologist Heidi Silvestra, joining us live in Svalbard in Norway, having just gone and dove in a glacier. And we're going to go diving in a very different way in just a few minutes with Alanna Canaran. She is an Ocean School producer. She's a diver. She's a mermaid. She's a little bit of everything in terms of exploring the sea's most incredible ecosystem, which is coral reefs. So today we're joining her live in Roatan in Honduras to talk about her diving life, coral reef restoration, all sorts of really cool stuff. I hope you guys are as pumped as I am. I think you might just be. But without further ado, I'm going to turn you over to Alanna to blow our minds and take us on a little bit of a journey into the reefs. Alanna, welcome to the broadcast. Nice to have you.
Hello, thanks for having me. So thank you for that great introduction and introducing Ocean School as well. I'm super excited to be here. Just a little a preface is that I am located in Roatan, Honduras. Sometimes the internet is a little bit stable, so my friend Jesse is going to help me out with some slides and things like that.
Woohoo!
So thank you all so much for coming out today. Like Jesse said, my name's Alanna, and I am the science producer for Ocean School. Not only am I working for Ocean School, but I'm also a scuba diving and mermaid instructor. I love spending time in the water, and I'm truly the most at peace and connected to the earth when I'm underwater. I absolutely love it. So right now I'm visiting Roatan, Honduras, and I want to share some of the dive experiences that I've had learning about the reefs and the threats that they face, as well as what we can all do to help. So we can go to the next slide, and I'll show you where I'm located in the world. Roatan is a small island in the Caribbean Sea. It's part of the country Honduras, and it's located just northeast of the mainland. So that tiny little star by Guatemala is where I am in the Caribbean Sea. Roatan is part of the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef. It's also known as the Mayan Reef or the Great Mayan Reef, and it's actually the second largest barrier reef in the entire world, second to the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. So the Mesoamerican Reef stretches over 1,000 kilometers from Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, to the north of Honduras, where I'm located. There's so much cool biodiversity here. There's beaches, dunes, mangroves, seagrass beds, coral reefs. These ecosystems go from the land to the sea, and they all are very connected. They rely on each other to be healthy. So really, when you talk about coral reefs, you want to talk about all of these ecosystems. And if you want to protect reefs, you need to protect the mangrove forests, the seagrass beds, and the beaches as well. But for the sake of time, and because I'm a scuba diver, we're going to be focusing on coral reefs. So the reef structures here can be really big and vast. There's lots of big swim throughs as well as walls, which I absolutely love to dive on. Basically what a wall dive is a big coral reef on one side of you, and then the other side of you is just the big blue deep ocean. It's absolutely epic. And these coral reefs support all kinds of marine life. Lots of turtles live here, green sea turtles, hawksbill, as well as loggerhead sea turtles. There's giant Goliath groupers that can grow to be the size of a car. And the Mesoamerican Reef is even home to one of the largest clusters of whale sharks in the world. So I've been diving in Roatan for just over a month now, and I'd like to share some of my dive experiences with all of you. I've put together a little video compilation of some highlights from my last month. So let's dive in, Jesse.
Let's dive in. I'm going to cue this up, and I just got to do a few little screen share things together. You're in for such a treat with this dive video. But I want to note, I got so excited in the beginning, I forgot to mention we're going to have a Kahoot together. So if you want to bring this up as a separate tab, a little 4-question quiz between our talk and Q&A after Alanna is done taking us on this epic journey together, I encourage you to join in with that. It'll be a lot of extra fun within this broadcast. But now that I've left that, and I will highlight this Kahoot pin again, we're going to put us in the background and we are going to play a little exciting video for all.
We gone diving. We gone diving. Boo-boo-doo-boo-doo.
Diving in Nova Scotia. It's called Jump In, available on Eastlink on YouTube for free. And we go diving and do all of these epic dive trips together. Here's me underwater manifesting a whale shark by wearing my whale shark suit. So Roatan holds a very special place in my heart. After I graduated university, I moved to Roatan to do my dive master for scuba diving. And it's where I fell in love with diving and spending time underwater. I studied marine biology in school, but this was the most immersed in the ocean I had ever felt. Right here is a parrotfish, by the way. They play an important role in the reef as grazers. They eat coral polyps as well as algae. And fun fact, corals are digested in the belly of the parrotfish. And parrotfish actually, that noise you hear is me screaming with excitement because we saw rough-toothed dolphins on the east side of Roatan. It was such a magical, magical moment. The visibility wasn't great that day, but it sure was on this day where we saw a sea turtle chilling on some coral. So there's so much biodiversity and life to see. Of course, Roatan has a special place in my heart. Coming back here a month ago, honestly, the first dive that I did was a fairly emotional one. Underwater, as I looked around, I started crying because the reef here wasn't as healthy as I remembered it to be. There was bleached, dead, and algae-covered coral everywhere. 8 years of human pressure and climate change since I had been diving here last really had changed the reef. So all of the bright white coral that you see in this video are unfortunately dead or bleached corals. Some of them are still alive, but they're not necessarily doing super well. And I know it's hard to tell, but a lot of the reef is also covered in algae. Algae can be really beautiful. They're nice, fun colors, and they are a sea plant, but they're not necessarily good for the ecosystem, and they're definitely not as good as the coral. So it is kind of sad to see the difference. This feeling that I had, this sadness that I felt that the reef was no longer the same, maybe some of you have felt it as well, but it was climate grief. I genuinely was grieving the coral. And I wanted to take that grief and change it into action. So I wanted to dive in deeper and learn more to do my part to help. So I started looking into solutions and I started to dive into what kind of research and work was being done to help curb this problem. And that's how I was connected to an organization, which I'll tell you more about later, but the Roatan Marine Park. And they manage the coast and the water surrounding Roatan and its neighbor islands of the Bay Islands. And they make sure the reef can be healthy and thriving now, but also for generations to come. They do really cool things for the reef, like set up mooring lines for boats so that they don't have to anchor down and injure the reef. One of my favorite things that they do is also lionfish hunting. So here's my buddy, Jen, who caught a lionfish with her Hawaiian sling. And then there's coral restoration. So by offering nature a helping hand, we can be part of the solution rather than the problem. What you see here are coral trees or coral nurseries. There's lines and pipes and buoys so that they can float upright, kind of like a tree. And coral fragments or coral pieces are hung on there to grow. So once these coral pieces are stronger and bigger, they can be planted, kind of like tree planting, onto a reef to help the reef hopefully recover and be healthy again. If you look closely at these trees, they're actually doing pretty well. I was talking to the scientist Michelle, who's leading this restoration project, and she actually told me that during the major bleaching event that happened in fall of last year, all of these corals showed signs of bleaching. But a couple months have now gone by of cooler water temperatures, and it's allowed the nursery to almost fully recover. So there is hope. The ocean is resilient. We just need to give it the space and the time to heal so that it can recover. And by doing things like coral restoration, we are offering it a helping hand as well.
I'm so happy you talk about this, and I know we've got a lot more of the presentation to share together, but I think conservation can be one of those fields that seems a lot of doom and gloom all the time, and there's so much reason for optimism and hope, and there's so many people, literally millions of people that are working every day to bring back these ecosystems. We're going to dive more in with literally like bringing back coral and planting these forests that are so exciting, but I just want to stress for all our kids, wherever you're tuning in from today, like there's tangible actions that you can do wherever you are close to home. And there's people that are working on this in some of the most special places on planet Earth, like Alanna's had the chance to show us a little bit today with in Honduras. So with that, I'm almost done talking. Again, I'm going to turn it back to her and take us away.
Cool. I will try to be very optimistic in this talk. Obviously, there will be some sprinkles of things like coral bleaching happening, but I am here to leave you off on a hopeful note, helpful and hopeful. So that's my underwater tour. It's made up of some videos that I took over the last month. I mentioned quite a few things, so let's unpack some of those concepts. So first thing, let's talk about corals. We're going to talk about what they are and why we love them. So corals are living organisms. Do you think they're plants or animals?
Ooh, I love this question. Okay, I'm going to actually take a second. Emily, our Forest Edge class. Forest Edge, welcome in, by the way, on StreamYard. If you guys want to flick on your mic, I can absolutely come to you if we're going to do Q&As like this, so feel free to do that. YouTubers, if you want to chime in, corals, plants or animals? Also, this question may or may not feature in our Kahoot. Spoilers in advance. Let's see. I'll say hi to Forest Edge while we're there. Hi, guys. Welcome in, fifth graders. Let's see.
Forest Edge.
Hello. So while you're here, no, you can keep unmuted. What do you think? Corals, plants, or animals? Like, they're pretty on board, Alanna. This is very exciting. Okay. Let's dive in.
Good work. And hello, Forest Edge. That is where my family friend / cousin lives. So thanks for joining in. And you are absolutely correct. Corals are animals. They kind of look like these upside down jellyfish creatures. And you can see that they do have a mouth in the center of their body. Surrounding their mouth is a whole bunch of tentacles. They use those tentacles to catch and guide food into their mouths. So each of those jellyfish-looking creatures is not actually a jellyfish, but it's called a coral polyp. And coral structures can be made up of hundreds or even thousands of these coral polyps that grow and work together to build the coral. And then reef-building corals can then create reefs that then support marine life by providing things like food, habitat, and protection. Let's go to the next slide. So for those of you who thought that corals were plants, you're actually not that far off. Another way that corals get their energy and their food is through algae called zooxanthellae that live inside of the corals. We can call them zooks for short. It's a bit of a mouthful, zooxanthellae. So zooks and corals have what's known as a symbiotic mutual relationship. It's kind of like a friendship where both parties benefit. The coral provides a protected environment and the nutrients that the zooxanthellae need for photosynthesis. And in return, the algae produce things like food and oxygen that the corals use. The zooxanthellae also removes waste, and it's actually this algae, the zooks, that provide corals with their really beautiful, vibrant colors. We can go to the next slide. There are deep water corals and even cold water corals, but they're a slightly different story. They're like same, but different. The quintessential reef-building coral reefs are usually found in shallow, tropical, warm waters, much like the water here in Honduras. So coral reefs are known to be some of the most productive ecosystems in the world. They only cover about 1% of the seafloor, but they're home to 25% of all marine life. Just here on the Mesoamerican Reef, it's estimated that 2 million people rely on this reef for food, livelihood, and it supports a multi-billion-dollar tourism industry through scuba diving, snorkeling, fishing, resorts, and cruise ships. That's a lot of people. And all of these people means that there is a lot of pressure on the coral reefs. And the reef has become threatened due to things like overfishing, pollution, development, and agriculture. And the effects of climate change is causing warmer water temperatures. It's causing sea level rise, stronger tropical storms. Like we had a pretty big hurricane season in Nova Scotia, where I live, in the warm months of the year. And there's also a change in chemistry happening. One of the ways that we can protect this really important biodiverse reef is to create more marine protected areas. So does anyone know what a marine protected area is? It's actually a fairly simple concept, but sounds confusing.
It does. Well, let's see if anyone wants to chime in. Again, YouTubers, if you want to put in anything in the chat, we'd love to hear from you there. Forest Edge, you're our live big group, so I'm going to come to you if you want to unmute your mic. Marine protected area. You can keep your mic unmuted too, guys. What do you think? All right.
Does one person want to answer the question?
Yeah. What did it say? What did it say?
Can you ask the question one more time for us?
Yeah. What is a marine protected area?
It's a marine protected area.
Virginia.
Katie.
Kind of like a national park.
Kind of like a national park.
You got it.
We got it.
Yeah, fantastic, Alanna.
Awesome. So just like you may have said, I didn't quite hear, but marine protected areas are areas set aside from certain harmful human activities to give the ocean space and time it needs to thrive. So let's go to the next slide. These marine protected areas are where the Roatan Marine Park comes into play. So Roatan and its neighboring islands, we'll go to the next slide, make up the Bay Islands. And they're all protected by a marine reserve. Here in Roatan, that reserve is managed by the Roatan Marine Park. They are on the front lines, ensuring that Roatan remains a paradise not just for us, but also for the future generations. Remember how I mentioned that the land and the sea are heavily connected pretty much everywhere, but especially here. Well, this marine park protects the coast, which includes beaches and mangroves, as well as the water, which includes seagrass beds, coral reefs, and even the deeper ocean. So there are certain limitations on what we can and cannot do in this protected area. And it does change depending on what country you're living in or where the marine park is located. Let's go to the next slide. So here in Roatan, the Roatan Marine Park does a lot of cool things. In my dive video, I shared lionfish hunting with you. So that's one of my favorites. Lionfish are an invasive species all over the Caribbean, and they were accidentally introduced here from the Indo-Pacific. They're bad for the environment because they prey on native fish, and they don't actually have any natural predators, so they can take over the reef. So to combat this, the Roatan Marine Park trains divers to hunt them, and this keeps their population in check and so helps to improve the overall health of the reef. They teach a workshop to licensed scuba divers to use what's called Hawaiian slings to hunt them. And now with this change of kind of marketing, there's a market for their meat. Local artists have started making jewelry out of it. So now with so many hunters patrolling the reef, there are fewer sightings, and especially around these heavily dove areas. So I actually got my license to use a Hawaiian sling. Here it is. It is pretty fun to use, and it is also very simple to use. So what we have is the sling part. It's made out of rubber tubing, and that allows you to get a good slingshot in. The middle part, we have the shaft, and then on the end is the dangerous part. I have a protector on top of it, but these are the prongs or the spear of the Hawaiian sling. So how you use it is you want to take the rubber in one hand, pull it down until about this black marking. Let's see if I can get it all in, and shoot it. You want to aim for the side of the lionfish to try to get it. It has a very hard, bony head, so it's sometimes hard to kill it from the side. I love eating lionfish. They are actually pretty tasty. I've had them in ceviche or fried fish. It's quite nice. Let's go to the next slide, Jesse. So unfortunately, one of the problems that the reef is facing is a disease called stony coral tissue loss disease. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's been hurting coral reefs here in the Caribbean since 2014, and it was first found in Roatan in 2020. It spreads really fast, and it affects many corals, specifically these hard stony corals like brain corals and pillar corals that you can see on the picture on the screen. This disease, let's go to the next slide. This disease eats away at the fleshy polyp of the coral, kind of like a flesh-eating disease. And it's a bacterial infection. So the Roatan Marine Park recommends properly cleaning boats, scuba gear, fishing gear between affected dive sites to help stop this spread. Because it's a bacterial infection, we can actually treat infected coral with antibiotics that humans use. Let's go to the next slide. So amoxicillin is one of these antibiotics. If anyone has ever had strep throat or a lung infection, you were probably prescribed amoxicillin to cure you. How it works for corals is that amoxicillin is made into a kind of paste, and it's put all around the affected area of the coral to help stop the spread. This is a very labor-intensive and expensive process, but it is really interesting to know that treatment is an option. Local divers here can also participate in citizen science by helping with monitoring, by taking pictures of these spots with tags and submitting it to the appropriate organization, like in this case, the Roatan Marine Park. And it shows through these pictures if the disease is spreading or not. Let's go to the next slide. Coral bleaching is probably something many of you are familiar with, or if you're not, we're gonna explain it now. So coral bleaching happens when a coral is stressed. Remember those zooks that I mentioned, that algae? Well, if temperatures are too high for an extended amount of time, or if there's an increase in pollution, the corals become stressed. When a coral is stressed, the zooks become stressed as well, and they'll just get up and leave. Since algae get their color from, or since the corals, get their color from algae, they become white or bleached without them. So you can see pretty much right into their white calcium carbonate skeleton. It's kind of like their bones. We can go to the next slide. A bleached coral is not a dead coral, but it is a weak coral. So it's more vulnerable to things like, you can go to, yeah, perfect. Oh, we'll go one before with the bleached picture, yeah.
It's just panicking on me. It's panicking, Alanna. It doesn't know what it wants. It's too excited for the end of the slide deck, I think. I don't know.
Well, since I have this up, you can see that the white parts are bleached coral. The stressed areas are kind of greenish in color. And then just on the fringing, or just on the outside of the coral on the left, you can see that some of the polyps are actually healthy, but as a whole, this coral is experiencing some bleaching. It is a kind of interesting pattern to see this bleached, stressed, and healthy area on one specific coral. This might actually even mean that the coral is recovering. You know, the water temperatures have become colder. They've reduced since this mass bleaching event happened in September, October of this past year. Water temperatures got to above 30 degrees Celsius for an extended amount of time. And that was the main stressor that led to a lot of this bleaching. But we are seeing some recovery. To help with recovery, we can go to the next slide. So some coral restorations can help with recovery. Really briefly, I'll tell you about how corals can reproduce. They can reproduce two ways, asexually or sexually. So asexually means that if fragments or pieces of the coral are broken off, they can regrow into a separate piece altogether, into a new plant, into a new coral. Some plants do this as well. If you take a cutting of certain houseplants and put them in water, they'll start to grow roots, and then you have a whole new plant. Same idea. The marine park here is taking coral fragments and growing them on these trees until they're big enough to then be planted onto a reef. So that's what this tree you can see is for. The corals are in an environment where they can grow big and strong. Let's go to the next slide to show sexual reproduction. So what that means is that corals can produce eggs and sperm and produce them into the water. They mix and they create these almost free-swimming young corals that look like jellyfish. They're called medusa. And they swim around until they find something hard like a rock or a coral that they can attach to. Then they'll multiply and grow. So these spawning events for corals only happen once a year, depending on the species. So the marine park is tracking the spawning events so that they can step in and try to collect the sperm and eggs and help the process of growing new corals later to be outplanted onto the reef as well. And it's really cool to see all of this innovation and creativity when it comes to coral restoration. And it's good to see in some cases that these efforts are actually working. However, with more coral bleaching events happening more frequently, even these young new corals are at risk. So we need more creative and adaptive solutions to ensure a healthy planet in the future. For example, if you want to check out some of our ocean school content, we have a video called Super Coral. And this is a video that tells us all about how the Australian Institute of Marine Science is selectively breeding more heat resilient corals. Pretty cool. Solutions are where you can come into as well. All of you bring something unique to the table. You have the potential to be the next generation of policymakers, scientists, politicians, scuba divers, and ambassadors. And you don't necessarily need to even be a scientist or a scuba diver to help. You don't even need to be beside the ocean to help. You are connected to the ocean in every single breath that you take. Specifically for corals, the next slide has some examples of things that you can do to help. So you can do things like wear reef-safe sunscreen to make sure that those bad oxobenzones and those bad chemicals in sunscreen aren't hurting the reef. Or maybe you can help with marine cleanups, shoreline cleanups, and make sure that no garbage, or at least less garbage, is entering the ocean. So I want you to all think of things that you can do in your home, your school, your community to live for a better ocean. And on the next slide here, I want to invite each of you to make an ocean promise. This is a commitment to do something to show the ocean that you care. No action is too small, so let's show the ocean some love. Just in time for Valentine's Day, you can go to our website, oceanschool.nfb.ca, to make your promise and pin it on our map to show your commitment. So alternatively, you can write your ocean promise in the chat, and teachers, please share the numbers of the learners that you have in your class that are committed to making an ocean promise, so we know how big this wave of change really is. Just to give you an example, we can go to the next slide, which is just me in scuba gear and me as a mermaid. I teach lots of courses, and I try to train my students to all be stewards of the ocean. So all of the classes that I teach are conservation minded. So think of something that you can do. Like I said, no action is too small. Does anyone want to share their ocean promise with me?
Ooh. Putting them on the spot, Alanna. I like that very much. And I will link in the Ocean Promise, a link to all our classes at the end, as well as the Super Coral video, which I have put up on all the YouTube and Facebook channels, everything else that anyone's doing. Forest Edge, if you guys want to chime in, YouTubers, something that you can do for the ocean. For me, something that's really simple is when I go out, I try and make sure I have a litterless lunch. I do that universally. I use Tupperware containers. I've got a thermos. I've got like a hot coffee mug, so I don't have to produce waste, because really, no matter where you are, I happen to live on an ocean, but you can live in the middle of Saskatchewan, and it doesn't matter. The stuff that you produce can end up in an ocean, whether it's rivers or lakes or picked up in a landfill. It's amazing how much can wind up in the sea. So that's something that I like to do that really makes a big positive difference. Anyone else willing to chime in? Fantastic. And I will link in a survey at the end of this broadcast as well. So if you guys want to chime in there too, that is totally fine. Fish responsibly, Mr. Hugh Miller's class. So choose sustainable seafood. This is something that we have a lot of conversations about in the broadcast that we have. So that's a fantastic option. Thanks, guys. Yeah. Those are some good options, Alanna. Do you have anything that you want to share that you do particularly?
So another thing I do is, because I do spend a lot of the time in the water as a diver, I try to make every dive a dive against debris. Anytime I see garbage, plastics floating around in the water, I can't even help myself, but I have to take it and dispose of it on land.
Fantastic. That is I do the land equivalent. When I walk in a park and I see some trash, I pick it up and throw it in a garbage bin or take it home or whatever I need to do to make sure it doesn't get anywhere where it shouldn't be.
Good. Good work, Jesse.
Thank you. Oh, I love the praise. We'll head back to our slide deck and wrap up shortly before we dive
That is
into
actually the last slide. So we can move on to our Kahoot. And then I'm excited to hear some questions that all of you folks have.
Well, first and foremost, I'm going to say that was an incredible journey. So thank you so very much for that. The dive video was spectacular. All the information that we've had the chance to share. I know for a lot of kids, this will be all new to you, which is awesome. And if you have learned a few of it before, I hope it was a really captivating way of sharing such neat stuff. So as Alanna mentioned, we're going to dive in with our Kahoot now. If you haven't done Kahoot before, the faster you answer, the more points you get. And what you win is Alanna and I's everlasting respect, which I think is quite a bit. So there's 33 of you already in. That's amazing. The more the merrier. And if you want to just chime in your classes as well, that works as well. We're going to cover some stuff that we covered today in the talk. So test some understanding, have a little fun. And then we are going to go with Q&A. So YouTubers, Facebook groups, share your questions in the chat. Forest Edge, if you want to share some questions, we'd love to hear from you. We'll come to you guys live in just a minute as well. But let's get underway with our Kahoot. All right. By the way, as this is queuing up, coral spawning is the greatest single thing in all of nature, and everyone should go look up a coral spawning video immediately. It's like fireworks of the sea, and it rocks.
Cool.
Where's Alanna joining from today? This should be super easy. I want like 100%, and if you get it wrong, that's okay too. But Costa Rica, Honduras, Indonesia, Australia. Roatan, where is it? Where are all these amazing reefs she's had the chance to dive on? All of these places have reefs and have amazing seascapes that you can go explore.
They sure do.
You should.
I've only been to one of them.
Honduras, yes. So most of you got this right. A few of you stuck in the general area. Honduras is where Roatan is. Way to go, guys. Let's see where that puts our leaderboard. Giving Buffalo, which is inexplicably a tiger in a witch hat, is first. True or false? Coral or plants? We talked about this. Dun, dun, dun,
You'll know
dun.
this.
It looks kind of like a plant. This is such a pretty flower. My goodness.
They're pretty.
Valentine's Day is coming. I could have a flower just like that on my table, maybe. But no, might not be. Or maybe a mix of both. That's what's kind of fun about coral. It's sort of like it's a mutant hybrid. It's
Love it.
False, it's correct. So it is an animal at base. It has that zooxanthellae, the zoox inside its tissue. So it's sort of like an animal. It's got like a plant buddy. That makes like a rock skeleton. It's very fun. Who knows what they're thinking all the time. All right, does that change our leaderboard? Kind Falcon takes our lead. Question 3, Alanna, if you want to give us hints in the final few seconds of this, you're welcome to. Coral.
Yes. What happens when you can see, or what happens when you use something in your home that helps to make white t-shirts white again?
I like when you tried to find like a Hanukkah thing. Fantastic. Because it's skeletonizing, dyeing, whitening, or bleaching. Whitening is that I did to my teeth earlier. I think I got very pearly whites.
They're pretty white.
Bleaching.
Yeah.
Oh, this is like an overwhelming response. Way to go. It is bleaching. That is our process. And does that mess with the leaderboard? Kind Falcon keeps the lead with a good margin going into question number 4. Our final question before we head to Q&A. You can plant corals to help them get a head start, like undersea forests. We saw this at the end. Is it true or false?
Literally a coral tree is what they're called.
It's one of the coolest things ever. The fact that this is possible, like the fact that we do this as scientists and conservationists is amazing. And of course, with 4 seconds to go, spoilers, the answer is true. And it's incredible stuff. You can go to places in the world and plant forests. And most of you got this right. Way to go, everybody. Let's see where this puts our leaderboard and make a real positive difference for these incredible habitats. All right. 3rd place, Helpful Cat. 2nd place. If you are into these people, let us know in the chat. Fearless Impala. And number 1, for everlasting respect. You all get our respect. Thanks for participating. Kind Falcon for the win. Way to go.
Good work. Good work,
right.
everyone.
So let's dive in with Q&A. Forest Edge, I'm coming to you guys in a second. You can percolate for just a minute, but we're going to take some from our chats. Interesting. Miss Tamash's class joining us in Alaska today. Welcome back, folks. They want to know, does breaking off coral help it grow hurt the original coral when you're taking a chunk off to grow a new one? Or how does that process actually look, Alanna?
So breaking off a coral by accident would not be helpful to the coral. However, because coral can reproduce asexually, if that coral lands in a good spot, it has the chance to create a new coral. But generally, try your best not to break off a piece of a coral unless you know what you're doing and you're part of research being conducted. Try your best if you're in the water to not stomple on coral. If you're a scuba diver, maintain neutral buoyancy so that you're not whacking up into the coral.
And so when you get the baby corals to start off this new forest, are you ripping that off old coral? Are you growing that in a lab? Like, where are you getting that coral? Is it from ones that are in the wild?
So it can be both. It
Yep.
can be taken off from a healthy piece of coral and broken off just in a fragment, or it can also be grown in a lab and then planted into the ocean on these trees to be grown fuller and then replanted onto the reef.
We're doing a program in a couple of months on my birthday, actually, with the Coral Resilience Lab in Hawaii. And they've got this amazing series of tanks where they're growing this. Australia has a really cool facility like this as well. So increasingly, we're seeing people grow them in labs and then take them out, just like we can grow little baby trees in little pots at home and then go plant them in a forest. So I like the concern for our coral friends. Way to go, guys. Forest Edge, we're going to have to rest and come on in, unmute your mic, and take us away, folks. Hi. Yes, I know.
Oh, so excited. I love it.
That's what we're doing.
Oh. Yeah, we gotta be. I know how excited you are. I agree. But
Reel it in.
We'll come one by one for questions, okay? Perfect. Oh.
Yeah, Didia, what's your question? Say it really loud.
How many like how rare are the lionfish sightings now?
Ooh. How rare are the lionfish sightings now, Alanna? Great question.
So where I am currently living, it's called West End in Roatan, and this is a very popular dive site. There's lots of divers in the water every single day. Many of them are trained to kill and hunt lionfish. So thankfully, just in front of me where the reef is, there aren't a lot of lionfish. I'll bring my sling out and pretty much never have to use it.
Yep.
However, on the other side of the island, on the east end, where it isn't dove as frequently, there are still quite a few lionfish.
It's really interesting, and I'm so glad you spent so much time talking about this in your talk, because the idea of killing animals to save wildlife seems really counterintuitive. And I know when I was a kid, I was like, what? They're doing what? But it's really important. We can introduce species, and we've done this all over the world, that can have a really negative impact on the ecosystems that we're trying to protect. And sometimes it does require thinking of them in a new way as food that we have to hunt and take off the reef to help the other things grow. And I think that I'm just really glad you took the time to mention that today.
Yeah. And it is pretty cool. We can eat them as food. Like, we're not wasting them. We're eating them. They're delicious. There's even local artists that make jewelry. Like, the spines are so beautiful. So they'll preserve them in resin and make things like earrings.
Very cool. If you ever get any of those earrings, you should wear them.
I know, I should have.
Are you?
No.
Oh, you okay? Would have been amazing. I'm going to take one from our YouTube friends. How long do your dives last? You started with this amazing video. You're going in the water. What's the deal?
Generally, my dives are about an hour at a time, but there are a lot of factors that will limit your dive time, such as depth. The deeper you go, the shorter amount of time that you can spend in the water. If you're maybe a new diver, you might be breathing really quickly, so you might go through your tank of air faster. In Nova Scotia, when I dive in the cold water, I'm wearing a dry suit. So sometimes my dive is limited to when I have to go pee.
You're the first person to ever mention that as a limiting factor on dives. You mentioned the excitement, though. So you've dove a lot more than I have. I've been on 10 dives in my life. So when I go in, I'm like, what? Look how cool that is. Oh my gosh. And so it lasts like 15 minutes because I'm just too overexcited. I do want to harp on something, and I usually put this in the Kahoot, and I didn't today. So, Alanna's an amazing diver. She has done dives all over the place. She's really super cool, and we can all aspire to be like her. However, in your classes, and I think almost every class that's with us today, if you join up with something called PADI Bubble Maker at 8 years old, you can start on the path to being a diver. And at 10, you can get the same certification that I have. So you can become an open water diver. You can dive to 60 feet. You can stay underwater. Like, that is an incredible thing. And literally, even if you're in Saskatchewan, you can go learn to dive. Like, they do it in quarries and pools. And so don't let your location be an impediment to you. Diving opens up 70% of the world to you, and it's like one of the most magical experiences you will ever have on planet Earth. So I'm so glad
So I'll just say one thing. I learned how to dive when I was 15 years old, and I think that experience is what made me really want to study the ocean. It was such a magical experience. I actually learned in Ontario in a quarry over there in Canada, and it was cold and it was dark, but it was still so beautiful and magical to just be underwater, breathing underwater. All of you can do it. I've taught the PADI Bubble Maker class, and it's a lot of fun.
Amazing. How nice is that? You're the first person who's ever said that in one of the broadcasts. This is the fun of this job, is that I get to hear people fulfilling the things that I've talked about for years. Very exciting. All right, a toughie question, and then I'm going to head to our Forest Edge crew. Time flies and you're having fun. So we're in like the final 5 minutes of the shindig together. Do you have a favorite place to dive? Like an all-time best spot ever? No pressure.
Oh, so many good spots. Honestly, I love Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia, Canada. It's home to me, and I think it's pretty cool that I can just go scuba diving in my own backyard. It's full of life, like great white sharks, lots of fish, and really, really beautiful, not quite coral reefs, but really beautiful like reef-like structures and kelp forests to dive on.
Alanna, you cover everything that I'm going to follow up with in the Q, like literally in all your answers, and it's amazing. So Nova Scotia does have great white sharks that are regularly off our coast, and that's something that I had no idea about. And soon there's actually going to be shark diving off the coast, sort of as a thing where people can come and do that, which is incredibly wild. Because when I was a kid, it was like, go to South Africa or Australia, and now it's in our backyard, which is wild. Very cool. Forest Edge, I'm coming to you for one final question, and then we are going to ask Alanna one final question sort of on behalf of all of us before we wrap up together. Reston, hey guys.
Hey, Zayden, can you share your question? All right. Zayden's going to ask the one final question. Zayden, nice and loud.
What's the question?
Do you know how to...
sharks.
All right, guys, let's take one question, okay? Let's be respectful to Alanna.
Nyla, what's your question?
Are there any animals that are extinct?
Ooh, any animals that are extinct that you may have seen even in the past?
Animals that are extinct, I haven't seen any of them, but unfortunately there are some animals that are extinct, but we're going to try our best to live a conservation life to make sure that fewer go extinct in the future.
That's a very good point. And this is something that, again, conservation is one of the biggest parts of our mandates. There's so many people working to bring back species from the brink, lead to a future of abundance. So yes, there are some extinct animals that we've had the chance to wipe out over the last few hundred years, which is really tragic. And it behooves us all to make sure that we're not doing that going forward. And I think that certainly your generation, the classes here today, you guys are leading the charge in this in so many ways, which is very, very exciting. Alanna, before we wrap up and bring in our very enthusiastic class to say a farewell and thank you, is there any last message you want to share about your diving experience, Coral Reefs, Roatan, like anything to wrap up the program with?
Sure. Well, I definitely encourage all of you to make your ocean promise. Like I said, no matter where you are in the world, even if you're not directly beside the coast, you can make a difference to the ocean. So do your part, no matter how small the action is, because we can all make a difference.
There's no better message than that.
I hope to see some of you underwater in the future.
Yeah. Come down, go to Honduras, head to Nova Scotia when Alanna's there. I only have to go from Newfoundland, so I'm pretty close. I might have to do that. We'll see how it goes.
Let's do it, Jesse.
Encourage all our groups. Check out oceanschool.nfb.ca. The super cool clip. I'm going to get you the ocean promise in an email in just a minute, so stay tuned for that. And if you want to learn more about Roatan Marine Park, this incredible habitat that we've had the chance to showcase today, check out that link below. Thank you all so much for joining on YouTube, Facebook, and beyond. Forest Edge, I'm going to bring you in to say a big thank you and farewell too. So welcome back to the broadcast. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.